cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, but to the point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
And welcome to today's On The Money 2-hour special. You lucky people, where we're focused on the UK's cost of living crisis, helping you beat the squeeze. I'm Liam Halligan, and we're going to be talking about inflation as the Consumer Price Index hits a new 30-year high. Those price rises are really starting to bite. We'll be hearing from GB News viewers and businesses across the country, asking how the cost of living squeeze is impacting them and how they're fighting back. We're reporting from Northern Ireland, from Yorkshire, from the western outskirts of London. We're everywhere. All that after the GB News headlines with Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon, it's just gone 1 o'clock. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date. The terrorist who murdered Sir David Amess will spend the rest of his life in jail after being given a whole life order. The judge, Mr Justice Sweeney, said Ali Harbi Ali showed no remorse or shame after he killed the Conservative MP last October. Sir David's family described the murder as beyond evil. Met Police Assistant Commissioner Matt Dukes read a statement on their behalf.
It breaks our heart to know that our husband and father would have greeted the murderer with a smile of friendship and would have been anxious to help. How sickening to think what happened next. It is beyond evil.
Let's find out more of the details. We can go live now to the Old Bailey, where our Home and Security Editor Mark White is there.
Well, Ali Harbi Ali was defiant to the last. He refused to stand in the dock as the judge, Mr Justice Sweeney, passed that whole life tariff on this 26-year-old, and in fact, as he left the dock, was grinning. You can imagine, of course, the impact on the family of Sir David Amess, who have spoken of their heartache and the constant reminder, of course, that Sir David is no longer there. Well, we can speak to a close family friend of the Amess family, the former government minister, Anne Widdecombe. Thank you very much indeed for speaking to us live on GB News. Tell us, first of all, your reaction to the sentence today.
I think there's a great amount of relief both in the family and more widely in the constituency that he has got the maximum term possible, because he showed no remorse, absolutely none, no shame. He deliberately pleaded not guilty despite admitting the fact that he'd done it. So he put the Amess family through that entire trial, in which there was some very, very difficult detail to be absorbed. And I think there's no doubt at all that the judge was always going to impose this because there were no mitigating factors.
I know that you're close friends with the Amess family, and you've been with them and in contact with them throughout this trial process. Can't begin to imagine how difficult a process that must have been for them.
Indeed, but they've now asked for privacy. They've made their final statement, and I don't intend to comment any more on that. I'm now speaking solely for myself, and it's been very difficult for everybody concerned.
And as far as Ali Harbi Ali is concerned, even instructing his solicitor not to put any mitigation forward, it's clear that this is a young man who seems to be proud of the horror he's inflicted here.
Well, he's been very, very thoroughly radicalised. And I found it very disturbing, I always do when it happens, that somebody who is educated, articulate, clever, intelligent, is not civilised and can consider this a reasonable thing to do, indeed a thing of which he can be proud. That is very difficult to process. I mean, you expect people who are disadvantaged maybe can't work out what they're doing, but surely There should have been some empathy there, and yet there wasn't. Just none. He didn't care what he did to the family. There was no empathy at all.
And we know that there were some signs of his radicalisation as far back as 2014, where he was referred to the Prevent and Channel programmes. That was an alert teacher. How concerned are you that only a tiny fraction of the referrals to these counter-radicalisation programmes are coming from family and friends?
Well, let me say, first of all, it's very easy to be knowledgeable in retrospect, and I do understand they're going to get some things wrong. I do understand that. But nevertheless, what I would say is this, that to families, if they think that sons, brothers, whatever it might be, are becoming radicalised, or daughters for that matter, sisters, if people are becoming radicalised, report it, because you'll not only be saving the potential victims, you'll actually be doing your relative a favour, because this man now, he's going to spend 50, maybe 60 years in prison, confined to a narrow cell, a restricted exercise yard. He's never going to walk in the free country. He's never going to see any beauty of sunsets. And he's never even going to be able to do something ordinary like go shopping and buy a cup of coffee. That is all denied to him. So I would say to families, if you've got any suspicions, think of your relative as well. If you can't think beyond that to the victims, think of the relative. This is what's waiting for him. And that's why I'm glad he wasn't shot. He didn't get his martyrdom. This is what is waiting for them.
Finally, on the safety of politicians, we've seen, of course, instances in the past where Joe Cox was murdered, Stephen Timms was the subject of a knife attack, other politicians have been attacked and abused over the years. Is there more that could and should be done? You were a government minister yourself. Is there more that can be done in an open democracy where you have to remain accessible to the public?
I think there's got to be a balance. I don't think David would be pleased if in his name constituents and MPs were to become distanced from each other. He always wanted to be among his constituents. I used to walk with him in town centres in his constituency. He couldn't get 2 yards before somebody would come up to him and talk to him, and he would always engage. And that is so important. And any erosion of that is actually an erosion of democracy and of the proper representative process. Now, I do understand that precautions have to be taken. I do understand that. They must be proportionate. We mustn't overdo it.
OK, Anne Widdicombe, thank you very much indeed for talking to us live on GB News there, giving her first reaction to the sentence that was passed on Ali Harbi Ali, that whole life tariff. And I'll leave you with the thoughts of Ali Harbi Ali's victims' families, the families of Sir David Amess, who said that what really upsets them more than anything is to think that their loved one, Sir David Amess, would have greeted this young man with a smile and a handshake, would have been determined to do what he could to help Ali Harbi Ali, and instead, of course, was brutally murdered.
Mark, thank you very much for speaking to us there live outside of the Old Bailey. Well, you're watching and listening to GB News. Of course, we'll keep you up to date across the day. Now, let's head over to Liam for a special On the Money.
Coming up in today's On the Money 2-hour special, inflation shot up to a fresh 30-year high, we learned this morning, with the Consumer Price Index reaching 7% during the year to March. And as prices rise, wages are failing to keep up. So real post-inflation wages are going down. Will workers and trade unions fight back? We could see widespread industrial action, a return to the 70s. Or could we? We hold a detailed discussion. Plus, today's In-Depth Money Talks interview is with Rick Helliwell, who founded the UK's largest oven cleaning franchise back in 1999. His business has survived 2 recessions and then the pandemic. How did he do it? And what tips does Rick have for others who may want to launch a startup business? And as ever, I want your questions, opinions, ideas. What do you think of the issues raised in today's On the Money? Email us, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet @Liam Halligan or @GBNews. I'll read out some of your emails later in the show, so stay with us. This is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and you're On the Money. Last September, when On the Money launched, my very first words on this show warned of rising inflation. This morning, we learned the consumer price index during the year to March was 7% higher than the same month in 2021. Even before war in Ukraine, as the global economy struggled to get back into gear after lockdown, inflation hit a 30-year high. And now Western sanctions on Russia and Moscow's countermeasures have sent food and fuel prices soaring. That's driven the Consumer Price Index, the CPI measure of inflation, up 7% during the year to March, way beyond the Bank of England's 2% target. The Retail Price Index, which the bank used to target, that's hit 9%. And the Producer Price Index, that's the cost of the inputs that firms use to produce what they then sell to us, that ballooned 19.2% during the year to March. Now, soaring producer inflation suggests strongly that consumer inflation, what you and I pay in the shops, will rise more in the months to come. This cost of living squeeze will get worse then before it gets better, not least as wages are failing to keep up with these price rises. Average earnings rose just 3.8% during the year to January. Inflation was 5.5% during the period. I think we've got a graphic here, guys. So prices rose much more than wages. And that means inflation adjusted or real wages dropped 1.8%, the biggest fall since 2013. Now, when people have less purchasing power, the economy slows down. And that's what's happening. The growth of retail sales is stalling due to inflation, we learnt yesterday. This post-pandemic recovery has lost its bounce. The UK is now at a turning point not dissimilar to the late 70s. Back then, high inflation hammered real wages, sparking widespread industrial action. Pickets stood outside factories and rubbish went uncollected as refuse collectors refused to work, causing a national sense of outrage and dismay. Around half the UK workforce was in a trade union back in the 1970s. Today, it's just a quarter. But the unions remain strong, particularly across the public sector. And that's where wages have fallen most in real terms. And that's our On the Money question today. Could soaring inflation spark widespread industrial action? Grown-up conversations on this show with people who really know their stuff. That's what we do. I'm delighted to be joined in the studio by a friend of the show, John Longworth. He's the chairman of the Independent Business Network and the Foundation for Independence. He's the former head of the British Chamber of Commerce. Always good to have you with us, John. And down the line, we've got somebody from the National Institute of Economic and Social Research. Stephen Millard is Deputy Director for Macroeconomics and Forecasting at the National Institute. This really is Britain's premier independent economic think tank. Stephen, it's great to have you here on The Money with us. We really appreciate your time. So, John, let's talk about the sort of where the politics and the economics allied here with you. We'll go back to Stephen for some of the more technical side of the economics. You remember the 70s, if I may say so?
I do, yes.
As do I. It was a tough time, but we know that industrial action, which really framed an era politically and economically, in the end it was about inflation, hammering down real post-inflation wages. That's what caused the industrial unrest. Could the same thing happen now?
Well, it could. The 70s were a terrible time. Of course, we had rising energy costs, which affected the cost of everything, just as we have it seeing at the moment. But that was all around the formation of OPEC, you know, the oil
export cutters cartel,
precisely. And it was a time that was actually then brought to an end by the Thatcher era and monetarism and all the rest of it. Now, just as you were saying last year about the whole inflationary spiral, I was talking about stagflation.
You were.
Yeah, and the risk
inflation and an economic slowdown as well.
Yeah, and that is beginning to come into the language at the moment. So it's something we absolutely need to avoid. But the predictions are that inflation will start to tail off towards the end of next year. It'll start to go the other way. There are some people saying that. So that could actually ameliorate any pressure for wage rises. The most important thing is that the government have the tools to take action to prevent this happening. Rishi Sunak at the moment is doing exactly the wrong things. You know, as Patrick Minford has pointed out, The Economist, Sunak should be actually using government spending, you know, very Keynesian, to actually stimulate the economy. He should be cutting taxes to stimulate the economy and actually not worrying about the debt pile, because the tax returns from a boosted economy from growth will pay down that debt pile. The government should be looking for cheaper energy. We have all the energy in the UK that we need. We have gas under our
rein in
feet.
inflation if energy
Fracking,
costs go down,
We have North Sea oil and gas. If energy costs go down, then we can deal with that. And of course, also, there are some issues around oligopoly type activity. We've seen the fact that petrol retailers are selling petrol at inflated prices by comparison with wholesale prices. And the Competition and Markets Authority ought to be looking at the competition issues around petrol, because that environment has changed in recent years with the acquisition of Asda, for example, and Asda was the price leader on petrol.
You mentioned oligopoly there. That's an economic term for when an industry is dominated by a small number of providers that potentially they may collude on prices. They would, of course, deny that. But I agree with you. I think there's a lot of analysis of that kind of question coming down the track. Let's go to Stephen Millard of the National Institute. Stephen, we don't want to draw you into a political discussion. That wouldn't be fair. That's not what the National Institute is for. It's not what you're about. But let's just talk a little bit about these falling real wages. The numbers came out yesterday. I think they were rather overshadowed by all the Partygate revelations, but we did see one of the biggest drop in real post-inflation wages when the numbers came out yesterday, didn't we, in the last 10 years?
Yeah, that's correct. You know, wages are rising and the rate of growth is going up, but it's not keeping up with inflation. And nor do we think it's going to keep up with inflation as the year goes on. I mean, there's a big question about, in particular, what's going to happen to public sector wage growth. But you know, even though we think that's going to go up just a little bit, we think inflation is going to continue rising at least for a while, and so the real wage fall is going to continue.
We are seeing an increase in disputes, aren't we, between trade unions and employers. The TUC comes out with some data that was recently reported. The number of disputes are going up. But trade union law now is very different, isn't it? It's much more restrictive than it was in the 1970s, Stephen.
Yeah, that's correct. It's there's a lot of process involved in calling a strike. You have to go through a number of stages. And you know, as you said earlier, the actual weight of trade union membership out of employees is much lower than it was in the 70s.
Very interesting. I mean, the TUC, the Trade Union Congress, have come up with these numbers showing a lot more disputes. I've been reporting them here on The Money. And of course, in the public sector, trade unions are strong, doctors, teachers, nurses and so on. And while public sector wages are on average now higher than private sector wages, something that will annoy you, I know, what is undeniable is that over the last few years, public sector wages have been eroded more by inflation than private sector wages because of that government spending squeeze.
Yeah, but at the same time, there are more people now in the public sector than ever. You know, the numbers of civil servants is massive, and the government do actually, when there's a lack of availability of labour, need to start looking at whether in fact that's a wise thing that we're employing so many public and civil servants. There's also a lot of questions, of course, around the public sector. Our Independent Business Network has asked questions around why is it that the private sector are getting back to work post-pandemic and the public sector are still at home? Why do GPs not see patients, for example? You know, there's a demand from the public, I think, for the public sector to pull its socks up and actually get on and do the job. also, of course, you know, we've got to remember in the 1970s, we had things like flying pickets. Not only
I remember.
half the people.
Crikey. And they became a pop group, didn't they?
Pop group.
The Flying Pit, Only You. Remember, they did the Alison Moyer number.
Exactly.
John, hold that important thought. That's the really us 70s cultural references. Crikey. We'll be talking about choppers and space hoppers next. But thank you to Stephen Millard of the National Institute for Economic and Social Research. Fantastic you've appeared with us here, Stephen. Do come back again and we can share more of your expertise. On this same issue, let's cross over to our Northern Ireland reporter now. Doogie Beattie is with William Gilliland, the owner of XL Clothing, another former Chambers of Commerce head. God, we're spoiled. Our cup overfloweth here on GB News. Doogie, over to you.
Well, welcome to Newton Ards, this beautiful little town in County Down. With me, as you say, is William Gilliland. Now, William, shops have survived bomb attacks, recessions and property crashes. And I suppose, William, what is the main problem now with inflation?
Well, obviously, we're seeing rising costs in every single sector, not only from our energy prices, which in my last bill last quarter had literally more than doubled, through to the cost of the materials of the actual goods to get supplied. And for some of the goods that we would bring in ourselves from UK mainland or Europe, obviously the shipping costs have just become astronomical and in many ways almost totally unaffordable.
Well, we're constantly talking about food safety and manufacture and how manufacturing our own goods can keep that inflation down. What's the problems inside the rag trade at the moment?
Well, so much of in the rag trade of the brands that we would deal with, the manufacturing is based in the Far East. And although we have sort of in some ways come out of COVID, a measure of COVID, a lot of the factories, I'm being told, in the Far East, in China and Sri Lanka and others, still have their factories closed. So where typically there would be maybe a 6 months lead time into us getting our stuff delivered, there's also a 6 months lead time for them as well. And with factories closed and with staff off with COVID, and also them having problems with raw materials and energy themselves, because the energy crisis is global, this is seeing in some ways a delay in product coming through, and in other ways quite a significant delay as well, because of the distance it is being manufactured away.
And how do you see that playing out on the footfall in your shop and your tills?
Definitely you're seeing a degree of especially in the past number of weeks since the situation happened in Ukraine, there is definitely uncertainty with customers and maybe a little bit, buying a little bit more precautionary, where they would have bought maybe 4 or 5 things, it could be 1 or 2. And then there's other customers you just haven't seen, because I think the speed of what has happened as far as Ukraine is concerned, the speed at which we've seen the rise of costs and especially home costs as well, it's coming so fast for people. And we're only in spring. I mean, the real energy problems are up the road with winter time here. So people are trying to sit down and plan and think, how bad is this going to get?
Just very briefly, when do you see this, or how much worse do you see this getting?
I think it's going to get potentially a lot worse before it gets better. I think that question maybe should be given to Mr. Putin, of how things are going to play out with this. We've got difficult times ahead.
OK, thank you very much, and that's back to you in the studio.
Doogie Beattie there with William Gilliland of XL Clothing in County Down in Northern Ireland. This is On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. After the break, we'll be talking more about inflation and benefit rises and wages lagging behind those price rises. We'll be hearing from the Living Wage Foundation and also from Save the Children, 2 vitally important campaigning charities. Your emails are flooding in thick and fast. We'll read out some of those soon. Stay with us. You're On the Money.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's 2 questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 1:24. You're on the money on GB News, TV, DAB+, digital radio and online. Now, unemployment, which blighted the economy during the 70s and 80s, has hit a new record low, which is to be welcomed. But, as the UK's cost of living squeeze tightens, new figures show that in February, wages once again grew by less than inflation, falling at their fastest pace, as we said earlier, in almost a decade. So earnings are lagging behind price rises in the shop. And meanwhile, on average, UK living standards are falling. And we've seen just a 3.1% rise in benefits as well. That came in on Monday. Will that be enough to help families and individuals struggling with the cost of living? I'm joined now by two very important institutions. Catherine Chapman is here from the Living Wage Foundation, and Dan Paskins is the Director of UK Impact for Save the Children. Delighted to have both of you with us, albeit in difficult times. Catherine, what did you think when Rishi Sunak in his spring statement confirmed that benefits would be uprated by just 3.1% from April, which just happened? Yet at the same time, he confirmed that the government's official estimate of inflation, the rise in the cost of living for the next 12 months, was 7.4%, much more.
Well, you're right. We've been seeing these huge inflation figures, 7%, it's hit today, record levels. The focus of our work is about people who are in work but not earning enough to live on. As you've said, unemployment figures are fairly low at the moment, but what we are seeing is people who are in work not earning enough to make ends meet. And what that means for people in reality, we did some kind of polling and speaking to workers earlier this year, and around a third of people were regularly skipping meals for financial reasons. About 2/5 were falling behind on kind of basic household bills. So this is the impact of what we're seeing here of wages not rising in line with inflation. And that's why things like employers who can paying the real living wage, which is the only wage that's based on what it actually costs to live. That's why it's really important that employers that can afford it are paying to protect those people who are earning the least from the worst of these price rises.
So we know the minimum wage has just gone up to, I think, £9.55. What do you think, Catherine, from your research, your institution's research, the real living wage should be?
So the real living wage currently is £9.50 an hour, £9.90 an hour in the UK, and £11.05 in London. Yeah. And that's based on an independent calculation, takes into account, food, clothing, bills, rent, but also those little extras for a decent standard of living, like a school uniform for a child or postage for a birthday card. So there's a real robust calculation that goes behind it, and that's what the current UK and London living wage rates are. And that equates to about £800 a year more in the UK compared to the minimum wage. And that's only the rate you described, the £9.50, is only for over 23-year-olds, by the way. Ours is for everyone over the age of 18. And the London living wage is around about £3,000 a year more. So these are significant differences. But what we are seeing at the moment is more and more employers who are choosing to sign up to pay these higher rates. We've actually seen record numbers sign up in the past year. We've got 10,000 now nearly across the UK, half the FTSE 100, thousands of smaller firms, because they are wanting to do the right thing by their employees. They've seen the value of, so many of these low paid workers are the ones that kept us going during the pandemic, cleaners, shop workers, security guards. So they want to make sure that those people are being protected. Let's
go now to Dan Paskins from Save the children. Dan, these are tough times. I don't want to over-dramatise this, but real wages are falling. Prices are going up in the shops. We've just heard that even people on the minimum wage, the new upgraded minimum wage, aren't always able to access aspects of life which would be seen as completely normal and necessary by most people. What's the impact of this cost of living squeeze on children? I feel we don't talk about children enough.
No, thank you, Liam. I definitely agree. It's worth remembering, of course, that children have had a really tough time over the last couple of years with all the COVID pandemic, all the disruptions. So even going into this sort of current crisis, things were really tough for many families. We've been directly supporting families. Who are faced with choices about, you have parents sort of skipping meals to make sure their children obviously can continue to eat through the last winter. Not being able to, kind of heat their homes, putting on extra coats, going to bed early, all this sort of thing. And this was all even before these new pressures. And this is working people, as well as those who are unable to work. This is a really widespread crisis. What it means for children is that those children who've already had a really tough time are going to find it even harder. And that's, being missing out, the choices on heating or eating. It's also those things about when there's a sort of school trip, knowing that, you as a child are going to miss out on that. When there's a birthday party invitation, rather than that being really exciting, again, it's something. And you learn as a child sometimes, like, not even to ask because you don't want to cause more stress for your parents. Obviously, that's not something which any child should have to experience. Families we work with, if something breaks, then they don't tend to ask the landlord to fix it because that might mean the rent going up. You get just so many pressures for children, let's say, who are having a tough time. But also with these pressures, there's a lot of families who maybe have been getting by all right last couple of years who are going to get drawn into this. So, wages on average are falling, in real terms by more than £500, for the average worker. The energy bills, and this is even before October, going up by more than £800 on average. Benefits going up by half as much as inflation. And benefits are meant to be set, according to what actual sort of costs are. This is going to bring a lot of people who maybe did have a bit of money left every month into real difficulty, particularly because children grow, they need new shoes, they need new clothes, things at the home break. These sort of one-off crises are going to be really hard for families to cope with as well. So it's a really tough time.
John, very briefly, if you don't mind, I want to go back to Catherine and Dan for the final word. But you're broadly on the centre-right of politics. You used to run the British Chamber of Commerce. I know a lot of people on the centre-right of politics who think Rishi Sunak made a real political error by not uprating benefits by more than 3.1% last September's rate of inflation, when inflation now is so much higher. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's mean in many ways. And, of course, in economic terms, for a short-term measure, it will actually help stimulate the economy. If CPI inflation by mid-next year is going to be about 3%, an uplift for this year won't have to be repeated and repeated. So it's a relatively short-term cost. But putting the burden on taxpayers, of course, when they could do something different, which is reducing energy costs, is madness. The government should be providing secure energy for the UK.
Briefly, let's go back to Catherine Chapman of the Living Wage Foundation. Just very briefly, Catherine, and then Dan can have a final word too. What's your 10-second pitch to Boris Johnson, what you want to see to help people who you are campaigning for?
Targeted support for people earning the least in our society, and support for an encouragement for employers to pay the real living wage, including making sure there's enough money in the system for health and social care workers to earn a real living wage.
Well done to you. And Dan, what's your elevator pitch to the Prime Minister now?
Everything Catherine said, and make sure there's a social security system which lets sort of children thrive and upgrade benefits in line with inflation.
Well, Catherine Chapman of the Living Wage Foundation and Dan Paskins of Save the Children, great to have you on the show. And John, always welcome. We can do some more 70s nostalgia riffs next time you're back in the studio. Thanks as ever. John Longworth there. This is On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. Coming up, it's today's Money Talks with Rick Helliwell. He founded one of the UK's biggest oven cleaning franchises. Yes, it's a thing. But first, the GB News headlines with Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon, it's 1:33. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date. The terrorist who murdered Sir David Amess will spend the rest of his life in jail after being given a whole life order. The judge, Mr Justice Sweeney, said Ali Harbi Ali showed no remorse or shame after he killed the Conservative MP last October. Met Police Assistant Commissioner Matt Jukes read a statement on...
It breaks our heart to know that our husband and father would have greeted the murderer with a smile of friendship and would have been anxious to help. How sickening to think what happened next. It is beyond evil.
UK inflation has hit a 30-year high, putting households under more pressure. Official figures show it jumped to 7% in March. That's up from 6.2% the month before. Increasing prices of petrol and food are fueling the rise. Another increase in inflation is expected in April, reflecting the recent hike in energy bills. The Prime Minister's position has been described as untenable. Nigel Mills is thought to be the first Conservative backbencher to call for the Prime Minister's resignation. Well, that's after Boris Johnson, his wife and Rishi Sunak were fined by police for breaching coronavirus rules when they attended the Prime Minister's birthday party in June of 2020. They have all apologised and confirmed their fines have been paid. The UK is sanctioning 178 Russian separatists for propping up breakaway regions in eastern Ukraine. The move's been coordinated with the European Union. It's as Moscow's bombardment of Ukraine continues. In his latest address, the President, Volodymyr Zelensky, said Russia is using phosphorus bombs against his country. You're up to date here on GB News. We're on your TV, online and DAB Plus radio. Shortly, we'll be back to On the Money.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
And welcome back. It's 1:37. You are on the money. We're talking about inflation today, which hit during the year to March, hit a fresh 30-year high. I want to hear about how that's impacting you. So let's cross over to North Yorkshire, where our Yorkshire and Humber reporter Anna Riley is in Richmond with the owner of the Frenchgate restaurant and hotel. Anna.
Good afternoon, Liam. Yes, I'm here with David Todd. He is the owner of this 9-bed boutique hotel in Richmond. It's certainly lovely inside, but I mean, there's been some stark news for you today, hasn't there, along with other business owners, the 7% inflation rise. What do you think that's going to do for your business?
Well, thank you, Anna, but I mean, that's yet another bad headline for us in business. Time will tell, of course, what the impact's going to be. But as a business, 18 years we've been here now, we've had to deal with a lot of bad headlines, and you adapt. Businesses have to adapt to survive.
And how have you been adapting, and how have you seen your costs going up as well?
Well, the biggest adaptations we've had to make over the past 2 years is on the back of the pandemic, and during the pandemic, we had to look at the business and make some major decisions, major changes. And one of the major costs that we cut out, because of course we can only manage those things that are within our control, and the most immediate of those is costs. And the biggest cost we cut out was our restaurant. 18 years building a reputation, 2 Rosette restaurant. And we decided that the most costly and the most expensive part of the business we should close. And July the 4th, 2020, when we were allowed to reopen, we decided not to. And looking back with hindsight, it was a good decision to make. I mean, opening up for Christmas, having the 5 days holiday pulled at Christmas, didn't affect us. We cut those costs out, and today we're more resilient as a business. We're looking at very, very strong turnover to pre-pandemic levels, but without the restaurant's contribution. Profits are therefore higher. As a more resilient business, we're better able to cope with bad news such as inflation. We believe it will be short-term. We believe that there are factors outside of this country that are affecting inflation, and that everybody now has to adapt, the governments, the countries, and businesses such as the Partygate.
And what is the future for the hospitality industry? Because it might be a luxury that some people are deciding to drop if they can't afford hotel stays.
That's certainly not the case here in Richmond. As I mentioned there, that the turnover we have in this small business is back to pre-pandemic levels, but we've taken out a third of the business, which was the restaurant, which by definition means that the B&B side, the accommodation side, is booming. We've never had 100% occupancy until post-pandemic. There are definitely people out there looking for breaks, looking for stays. We're even now seeing the business community picking up and travelling again, despite Zoom and all the online options that they have to do business nowadays.
So it sounds quite positive then, even though we're having this news of rising costs. You know, you seem quite positive, which is great.
One has to be positive in business. One has to find a way. Nobody else is going to do that for you. Whilst we're grateful for the support through the pandemic, it's down to the individuals to make the decisions on site with your business, understanding your market, in order to survive what comes through the door. And the 7% news this morning is no surprise. We believe it will go higher, but we adapt. I mean, only today we had people knocking on the door, looking to supply us fresh produce. When my chef challenged them in terms of how they would work, it would mean an additional cost to have those goods delivered to us. It's a luxury we can't afford now, so we take out that layer of cost, which we used to have as a business, and we don't need it anymore. We go get our own fresh produce locally. The local businesses are the ones that benefit.
So you think basically diversifying, looking at where you're exactly spending the money, and then going forward really, and just keeping positive the way to go.
I'm sure we're not unique in the position that every business during the past couple of years has taken a very deep inward look at the way they operate. There are restrictions which prevent some of those changes that were necessary, and it would be great to see the bureaucracy and the red tape that controls businesses externally. It would be nice to see those relaxed, so that businesses can adapt their own way, leaner, meaner, more resilient, so that they can come out of this latest crisis, which is the cost of living, stronger, fitter, and start hiring and growing again.
Thanks so much for sharing that with us, David. And back to you, Liam.
Anna Riley there with David Todd, owner of the Frenchgate restaurant and hotel in Richmond, Yorkshire, showing some Yorkshire grit, telling our Yorkshire and Humber correspondent how he has had to take painful decisions adapting the business in order to survive and indeed to start to thrive again. It can be done. Let's cross over now to our London reporter, Alice Porter. She's in Uxbridge on the fringes of northwest London, and she's with Darishma Suki, who is the manager of the Shinner Boutique, an independent clothing store. Alice, take it away.
Hi there, good afternoon, Liam. Well, of course, Uxbridge is a very affluent area of West London, but unfortunately, when I've been looking down the high street here, there are so many businesses that are clearly have been impacted by the situation with inflation. And Darishma joins me now. Just talk me through a little bit about how you're finding the increasing inflation and the high prices, how that's impacting your business.
So basically, this has impacted my business a lot since the announcement was made that all the bills was going to go up. You know, we've seen a complete fall in the sales. We have customer that comes in, have a look. We got really nice new collection, summery collection, but it's like no one want to buy because, or when we ask them, you know, do you like it? They say yes, but the only problem is that we don't have the money because we got to pay the bills first. So this is how it's been impacted us a lot. Everyone doesn't have extra money to just come and treat themselves and spend on other luxury stuff.
So for you, it's not so much about, I mean, obviously we've been looking at sort of fuel prices and the increase in the cost of buying your groceries. But for you, that's not so much the sort of the products that are going up. It's more that people are disinclined to buy. I mean, we're looking here, it's all sort of, lovely items, of nice items of clothing, ones that you might treat yourself to. And that's something that people currently don't feel that they can do.
Definitely. We just want it, but we haven't got the finance to do it, you know. Every time it's just like, the prices, it's about the prices and it's no money to buy. So how do we expect to keep surviving if we have no buyers? It's very hard for us as an owner, as a manager of a shop. It's very hard for us to survive ourselves because we can't afford the wages for ourselves. Yeah, all we're doing is just surviving to pay the bills. That's all we're doing, and there's no profit out of anything.
So you're not making any profit at the moment in your business?
No, we are not since the lockdown. I mean, we started just 2 weeks before the first lockdown, and since then there has not been any profit at all.
And how's that sort of impacting you emotionally, but also as a fact, you're a mother, you've got a child. I mean, to be in a situation where you're working day in, day out and your business is not making any profit whatsoever, how is that?
Well, it's a lot of sleepless night, worried about everything, of how do we keep surviving, of all the bills that keeps being sent to us. We are well behind with our rent, and there's lots of costs, the business rate, which is not helping at all. So everything is just going up and up for us as well in terms of a bill. So it's just difficult. We are mentally stressed. It's very, very mentally affecting us, and we don't know what to do.
Well, Darishma Suki, thank you very much for joining me there. I mean, I think you get a flavour there, really, of how some people are feeling in Uxbridge. I mean, this is a beautiful shop. I've had a lovely morning walking through Uxbridge, and there's lots of fantastic businesses, but they're all really, really, really struggling with the cost of living right now.
Fabulous reporting there, Alice Porter, with Darishma Suki of the Shinner Boutique in Uxbridge, and indeed fabulous reporting also from Anna Riley with the owner of the Frenchgate restaurant and hotel in Richmond, Yorkshire, David Todd. Two of our small businesses here in the UK striving to get through this cost of living crisis. Time now for my daily interview series, Money Talks. And my guest is Rick Helliwell. He's the founder of Ovenoo, one of the UK's largest oven cleaning franchises. Having trained as a mechanic, Rick set up his own business after hearing about a mobile barbecue cleaning service while on holiday in New Zealand. Yes, really. He spent several years cleaning ovens and perfecting his business model before setting up Ovenoo in 1999, and since then his business and his brand has grown, employing over 120 technicians based all over the country. And here to tell us more about navigating his company over the last 23 years through thick and thin, and why you should maybe set up a business if that's the way you're inclined, it's Rick Helliwell, my latest guest on Money Talks. Rick, great to have you on the show. You are the epitome of British entrepreneurialism. You saw an opportunity. You literally heard about it at a party when you were on holiday. You set up a business. Tell us how Avenue works. It's a franchise model, isn't it?
It is a franchise, Liam, absolutely. Good afternoon to you. It's a business model that has been fine-tuned so that investors, franchisees can invest to fundamentally duplicate and replicate what has already been done successfully. So it comes to the market as a tried, tested, proven, profitable business model for people to copy, in effect.
And they can build on your brand, they can leverage, if you like, your brand, benefit from that. People know they're a trusted name because they are an Avenue franchise and you share their profit with them. That's how, Kentucky Fried Chicken is a franchise, Subway is a franchise, and indeed Avenue is a franchise.
Absolutely. There are hundreds throughout the UK of small local businesses all trading under a far larger corporate umbrella. So from the consumer's perspective, they get the best of both worlds. They get the big brand, the branding, the guarantees, the backup, the support, and the franchisees themselves are benefiting from economy of scale purchasing through us.
I'm going to ask a question that a lot of viewers and listeners will be wanting me to ask. How big a thing is oven cleaning?
Big business. Us and our franchisees just in the UK alone, I say alone because we have operation out in Australia and also a derivative out in the US as well. In the UK alone, we work successfully for roughly 50,000 clients a year.
Wow.
So it's big business and it's growing. It's just one of those horrible jobs that nobody likes to do.
And how much does it cost to really clean an oven? We saw some pictures there of your technicians turning up. What do they have that I don't have with a bit of elbow grease? Is it a special product? Is there a special technique? Do you have to sometimes dismantle ovens to clean them properly? What do you offer that I can't do myself?
Every time. We offer an oven valeting service. So
oh, wow, OK.
It's a little bit like the difference between poking your car through a car wash or even cleaning it yourself on your own driveway. Everybody can do these little jobs themselves, but we go to the nth degree. We're taking the door off, we're taking the door apart, we're cleaning in between the panes, we're taking off the back panel, the fan, we're cleaning up behind the element in the roof.
And that can improve performance too, sometimes, can't it?
Interestingly, yes, indeed, in these modern times where we're just talking about price increases on utilities, ovens are designed to reflect and refract heat. Dirty ovens just absorb heat and fundamentally waste money. So, OK, for a modest investment, upwards of 60, maybe £70 starting for a small cavity appliance, up to maybe £250, £300 for one of our guys to turn up and spend a whole day cleaning a top of the range Le Conche, for example.
Yeah.
It is absolutely top notch. Added to which, to answer the second part there, we have our own unique brand of products,
right,
which we have made for ourselves, absolutely, totally devoid of caustic soda, so we can clean safely all the bits and pieces that you guys might struggle with off-the-shelf products.
Why don't you work for someone else? Why are you a businessman? Why are you an entrepreneur? What makes you different? Can everyone be an entrepreneur?
The honest answer, no. They can't. Some people are quite happy getting up and being told what to do and when to do it and how to do it and how often to do it and how much money they can make at the end of the week. Once I finished my engineering apprenticeship, that never sat very well with me.
Just a personality thing.
Yeah. I mean, anybody can run a business so long as they've got a good plan and they've got a good product and they understand some fundamental basics.
And guts, right? It takes courage. There must have been times you've been through some, big issues with recessions and so on. You've been through the pandemic when it's hard to get into people's houses. You're facing a national insurance increase. Well, it's just been implemented. You've got a corporation tax rise coming down the track next year. There's always something, isn't there?
There is, and you're absolutely right. It does take a little bit of you know what, and that's the same for the franchisees. Yes, okay, we have a ready-made model, but there is still some work to do. The fundamental benefit to the franchise model is that it is tried and tested, and it is literally a case of replication and duplication, but there is still a job of work to be done.
But it must feel good when it's going well. You had the idea, you did it. I'm sure a lot of people said, you're mad, Rick. What are you talking about? Cleaning ovens? It's making money. You're employing people. I know that means a lot to you. You're helping families provide for their families, for their kids and so on. You're building a brand that this is a company of value. One day, maybe, if you ever wanted to, you could sell it. All that must feel good.
It does. It does. You do get a buzz, and I've always had a buzz, and I'll continue to have a buzz. Quick point, if I may, that all the franchisees are actually self-employed, so they too are working for themselves.
Sure.
So they understand that they need to get out, and I think
it's off the back of what you've created, of your insight and determination.
Absolutely, but they still have to get out there. They still have to do it. They still have to understand and listen and learn and get good value in exchange for the franchise fees that they're paying to use the branding and all the bits that we bring to the party. But yeah, still get a big buzz out of it because it's nice when things do go well. Tough when they don't, but really nice when they do.
Rick Halliwell, it's been a pleasure to talk to you. You are my latest guest on Money Talks. Thanks a lot for coming in.
It's been a pleasure.
Rick Halliwell there, the founder of Avenue, a very interesting business. He's been around since 1999 running this franchise business. Let's now bring in some of your views, your emails, your tweets. Andrew says, surely people on the living wage will also benefit significantly from the raising of the national insurance threshold. They will, Andrew. We've covered that a lot here on GB News, that national insurance threshold where you start paying NI going up to £3,000. But that doesn't go up until July, and national insurance rates have already gone up. So bit of a smoke and mirrors job there from the Treasury, in my view. Anthony says, why should the living wage be different in London than other areas? People choose to live in London. We up north are struggling as well. Well, the cost of living is much, much higher in London. We can argue about that another time. Bernard says it's very hard for families living on the minimum wage with the way prices are soaring. They certainly is. As a pensioner, we've already turned our heating off. The Tory policy is to kill the pensioner and the poor. I don't think it's quite to kill the pensioner or the poor, though we can agree certainly many pensioners and low-income families are concerned the government isn't doing enough. And Steve says, surely if we bottle all the hot air over Partygate, we can keep all the warm on the cheap for several winters. Well said. Keep your emails coming. This is a 2-hour show, so don't go with me. Stay tuned. After the break, I'm back for another hour. You're on the money.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Many places will be warmer and drier compared to yesterday. Also a little brighter with some sunny spells, but also a scattering of heavy showers, particularly for southern parts of the UK. Low pressure still close by. It's moving away, and these weather fronts are, well, departing the northeast of Scotland, but still a lot of cloud and further outbreaks of rain for the Northern Isles, for parts of Caithness into Aberdeenshire, the Murray coast, where it will feel on the cool side. But elsewhere, brighter and warmer compared to Tuesday. But as temperatures rise, we'll see a few heavy downpours, particularly for parts of Northern Ireland, into central and southern England, South Wales as well. These showers will be slow moving in places, could be quite torrential at times. 20 Celsius the high in the southeast. I think a warmer day to come with mid-teens further north, but staying on the cold side in the northeast of Scotland, where there'll be a lot of cloud and some outbreaks of rain and drizzle continuing overnight. Some mistiness around coasts and increasingly misty, murky conditions around the Irish sea coast into the south coast. Low cloud creeping inland overnight. So some gloomy conditions about first thing tomorrow. Some sunny spells around eastern and central parts, but a lot of cloud cover. A mild start nevertheless, and actually as temperatures increase through the morning, the cloud will lift and break up somewhat. And for many places, by the afternoon, it's looking fine. A lot of dry and bright weather and a little warmer once again, 21 or 22 Celsius in the southeast. We're looking at 14 for Glasgow, 13 for Belfast, and for the vast majority it's dry, but for Northern Ireland, for Western Scotland, here the cloud thickens. We'll see some outbreaks of mainly light rain and drizzle approach from the west, but that's really the extent of the rainfall on Thursday, apart from the odd shower possible over East Anglia and Lincolnshire. Friday looks like the peak of the warmth, and it's going to be fine for most. Further showers to come in the weekend.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
It's 2 o'clock here on GB News, and you're still on the money with me, Liam Halligan. The second part of our 2-hour cost of living special, as new figures show inflation hitting a fresh 30-year high. Well, Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak, they've just been hit with police fines for lockdown rules. Is the media making too much of Partygate when voters care more about the cost of living crisis? Or do they? We'll be discussing. Will war in Ukraine, Western sanctions and Moscow's countermeasures keep pushing up food and fuel prices? Again, we hold a detailed discussion. Plus, ongoing Easter holiday chaos and more from Northern Ireland, Yorkshire and across the country. All that after the GB News headlines with Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon. It's just gone 2 o'clock. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date. The terrorist who murdered Sir David Amess will spend the rest of his life in jail after being given a whole life order. The judge, Mr Justice Sweeney, said Ali Harbi Ali showed no remorse or shame after he killed the Conservative MP last October. Sir David's family described the murder as beyond evil. Met Police Assistant Commissioner Matt Dukes read out a statement on their behalf.
There is no elation in our family today following this sentencing. Our amazing husband and father has been taken from us in an appalling and violent manner. Nothing will ever compensate for that. We will wake each day and immediately feel our loss. We will struggle through each day for the rest of our lives. It breaks our heart to know that our husband and father would have greeted the murderer with a smile of friendship and would have been anxious to help. How sickening to think what happened next. It is beyond evil.
The longtime friend of Sir David, Anne Widdecombe, told GB News families need to look out for any signs of radicalisation.
I would say to families, if you've got any suspicions, think of your relative as well. If you can't think beyond that to the victims, think of the relative. This is what's waiting for him. And that's why I'm glad he wasn't shot. He didn't get his martyrdom. This is what is waiting for them.
UK inflation has hit a 30-year high, putting households under growing pressure. Official figures show it jumped to 7% last month. That's up from 6.2% in February. Higher petrol and food prices have been fueling the rise. Another increase in inflation is expected in April, with the data set to reflect the hike in energy bills. That will, of course, exacerbate the cost of living crisis.
It's going to be tough, really tough, especially for the elderly, and people on very low income. I don't know how we're going to manage, really. Well, I think really we need some extra help. I don't know how the government's going to do it, but we really do.
It's got so expensive now. Well, I do worry every day to actually where should I travel to or where should I go to.
We have to think 10 times before spending the money. So obviously we're not as free as before, and with the bills and everything, we're a bit more restrained.
The Prime Minister's position has been described as untenable. Nigel Mills is thought to be the first Conservative backbencher to call for his resignation. It's after Boris Johnson, his wife and Rishi Sunak were all fined by police for breaching coronavirus rules when they attended the Prime Minister's birthday party in June 2020. They have all apologised and confirmed the fines have been paid. Colette Walsh couldn't hold a proper funeral for her mum because of lockdown rules. She says she's appalled.
You couldn't hug anybody, you couldn't do nothing. She could, while other people was having parties in governments. Just annoyed about the whole lot, just disgusted about we couldn't do nothing with my mother's funeral. They were having parties while we were trying to bury our loved ones.
Voters in the Chancellor's constituency of Richmond in Yorkshire also gave us their reaction.
Sunak should go now. I don't suppose they will, but that's my opinion. I think we should have gone.
I personally had my mum's funeral and we couldn't have very many people at the funeral, and the Queen's there with nobody at her funeral for her husband, so it's just an absolute disgrace.
To be honest, I mean, if there was 20,000 fined, and I've watched his explanation on the television, as there's much bigger things currently, I'm afraid, we should be getting on without destabilising the country at this time.
The UK is sanctioning 178 Russian separatists for propping up breakaway regions in eastern Ukraine. The move's been coordinated with the European Union. It's as Moscow's bombardment of Ukraine continues. In his latest address, Volodymyr Zelensky said Russia is using phosphorus bombs against his country.
I urge you, whilst approving new and extremely important package of sanctions against Russia, a total blockade of Russian banks is also necessary. Not just part of them, all of them. And I also urge you to finally sanction Russian oil.
People carrying drugs used to spike drinks now face harsher sentences. The date rape drug, for example, GHB, along with 2 other related substances, have been reclassified now to be Class B. Well, that means people with the drugs in their possession could be jailed for up to 5 years. Those involved in supply and production face up to 14 years behind bars. The Home Secretary, Priti Patel, says the changes will help improve safety. You're up to date on GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head back to Liam for the special On the Money.
And coming up in this second hour of On the Money, as Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak are hit with police fines for breaking lockdown rules, do you really care about Partygate? Millions of voters do, of course, but millions more, perhaps, care much more about the cost of living crisis. Or do they? And maybe they want their politicians to stop squabbling and do something about that spiralling cost of living. We hold a detailed discussion. Will war in Ukraine, Western sanctions and Moscow's countermeasures keep pushing up fuel and food prices? Again, On the Money investigates. And what of that Easter holiday travel chaos? Stand by for an update. As ever, I want your questions, opinions, ideas. What should On the Money be covering? What do you think of the issues raised in today's show? Email us, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet @gbnews. I'll read out some of your messages later in the show, but stay with us because this is GB News on TV, DAB+, digital radio and online. I'm Liam Halligan and you're still On the Money. Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak have been fined by the Metropolitan Police for breaking COVID lockdown rules. Do you think they should go? Is Partygate a fuss about nothing? A plot by lefty media types to oust a Conservative government? Or are you furious, given the sacrifices so many of us made during lockdown? And do you want Johnson and Sunak to resign. It strikes me that while a lot of people are angry and upset about Partygate, many, many more are far more concerned about the cost of living crisis. Tory backbenchers by submitting letters to the 1922 committee chairman Sir Graham Brady. They could try to replace Johnson by sparking a leadership contest. Opposition leaders too could call a vote of no confidence in the government, and if enough Tory backbenchers back them, that would spark a general election. But I'd say, as this cost of living crisis escalates, voters would take serious umbrage at the sight of our politicians squabbling and the media class obsessing over who has what job. Plus, there's a war on, with the UK not militarily engaged with Russia, but helping to lead Western reaction to Putin's invasion of Ukraine and supporting President Zelensky's efforts to fight back. In that sense, the seriousness of this economic crisis and related geopolitical turmoil could be what keeps Boris Johnson, for now, in Downing Street. This question, it's really where economics meets politics at the moment. Prime territory for this show, and so that's our On the Money question during this second hour. Will the cost of living crisis eclipse Partygate concerns? Well, to get a first take on this, I'm delighted to be joined by my colleague, Tom Harwood, GB News political correspondent. Of course, he joins us from Downing Street. Tom, you and I and our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, Alistair Stewart, as these Partygate fines, news of them was breaking yesterday, this was really the issue we were grappling with, wasn't it? What are your thoughts now, 24 hours on? Is the cost of living crisis a lot more important? Will Partygate fizzle out?
Well, it was fascinating yesterday as this story was breaking to try and gauge the temperature of Westminster. Of course, it's a tricky thing to do while Parliament is in recess, as it is until the middle of next week. The fact that these fines, these fixed penalty notice orders dropped yesterday really, to some extent, might have ameliorated the immediate interaction between the media, the MPs and the government. The fact that the House of Commons lies empty until Tuesday is a particularly poignant point here, because of course we weren't able to get that crucible of feeling, the idea that there might be this greater heat, the sort of heat that we felt several months ago when all of this news was breaking for the first time. Well, now that 24 hours have gone by, it does seem to be that we are in a different space to where we were back in January and February. This seems to be a significant issue, but a less significant issue than it once was. I was speaking to Professor Sir John Curtis earlier, who was saying that, yes, this has increased the public's anxiety about Partygate as an issue, but ultimately not to the level at which it once was. And that is reflected really also in how Conservative MPs, and let's not forget, it is Conservative MPs that decide the Prime Minister's fate here, not what anything the opposition says, but how many on those green benches on the government side are going to take against the Prime Minister. And taking the temperature of the mood of Conservative MPs, it seems like an imminent call for a leadership election is not nearby. There are several arguments that Conservative MPs use. Firstly, nominally, the war in Ukraine, of course, a big issue that the Prime Minister has been seen the world around to have done quite well on. Britain has been at the front in terms of leading the unified Western response and indeed pushing European countries in particular to go further on sanctions. The SWIFT banking system, for example, is one area there. So clearly the Prime Minister has won back some credence amongst Conservative supporters, amongst Conservative MPs on that issue. But ultimately the question of further fines may destabilise things later on.
Very nicely summarised there, Tom. Tom Harwood, GB News political correspondent, kicking off this discussion. Do voters care more about the cost of living crisis than they do about Partygate? Will outrage and anger, very keenly felt by some, about those lockdown parties fizzle out over the weeks to come? Well, the Prime Minister's fixed penalty and apology may indeed be accepted by some, But for those who had no chance to mourn their loved ones or say goodbye, it will never be enough. Doogie Beattie has talked to one woman who lost her mother a couple of days after lockdown began.
Well, hello and welcome to Newton Ards. And yes, you're quite right. I spoke to a woman 2 days after lockdown. She was burying her mother. She never had a chance to say goodbye. She never had that big family funeral. I think she told me there was 9 in total at the wake, or well, not the wake, the funeral itself. She felt very robbed that couldn't take place. But I tried last night to talk to MPs, and of course we're in the middle of an election here in Northern Ireland, and so we can't talk to the MLAs, but every MP was ignoring the calls. They didn't want to take the calls, I think because they don't want to get involved in this particular argument. I think it'll drag them down to where they are. We already had a funeral here with thousands in the streets that Sinn Féin ran, and that really left a bad taste in the mouth for all. But I spoke to Colette Walsh last night, and she was quite upset about what had gone on in Westminster.
My mum died at the beginning of lockdown, 25th of March, 2 days into it. We weren't allowed to have a proper funeral, send-off. There was only 8 at the funeral. And we weren't allowed to carry the coffin, we weren't allowed to say goodbye, we weren't allowed to wake, we weren't allowed nothing like that. You couldn't hug anybody, you couldn't do nothing. So you could, while other people was having parties in governments, just annoyed about the whole lot, just disgusted about we couldn't do nothing with my mother's funeral. We couldn't have family at it, we couldn't have nobody at it. It wasn't allowed. It was just a funeral and then everybody back home.
So do you think there is any case for them gathering? I mean, can you look past it? Can you see a circumstance where they might have been partying? That they could justify it?
I'm just not happy with what they've done. Everybody else was they were having parties while we were trying to bury our loved ones with 8 people there. I was just not happy with it at all.
And will it come to a time where you will be able to say goodbye to your mother in a different way?
No, because she's gone. Mummy's gone now. No, I can't feel good, but can go back now and have a wake because she's already gone.
Well, there you are. The loved one has already gone. They've no way back to it. Those are the people that Richie Sunak and Boris Johnson have really got to apologise to. It really has to be heartfelt for it to be worth anything.
Doogie Beattie there, GBNews Northern Ireland correspondent, joining us from County Down. And joining the show now is the journalist and local government editor of Conservative Home, Harry Phibbs. Good to have you on the show, Harry. And the former Labour media advisor and writer, Scarlett Maguire. Good to see you too, Scarlett. Harry, I've tried to set out the basic conundrum there. On the one hand, Partygate makes some people really, really angry, incandescent for obvious reasons. We just heard from one of them there. On the other hand, for a lot of the population, they're thinking, can't we just get on with solving the cost of living crisis? What's your take?
Oh, I think that the real problem is that these lockdown restrictions were draconian and were disproportionate and were rushed through. And actually, they weren't very clear. A lot of people are saying, "Oh, the Prime Minister's lying. Obviously, he knew what he was doing. He knew he was breaking the law." Actually, when you try and define, things like what a party is, what a workplace event is, do you remember all that stuff about defining what a meal is? Is a Scotch egg a meal? Things that you might think were obvious. When you actually try and get a legal definition, they're quite hard to define. So I don't think it's any surprise that all sorts of people got caught up in these restrictions. But I think the real outrage was that they were imposed, such a draconian way, preventing people going to funerals and whatever. But I think that's something that politicians as a whole who voted these things through are responsible for. And I think that I think there's an element of double standards of some people trying to say it was only Conservative politicians who broke the rules, or that the Conservative politicians were doing it deliberately. I think the whole thing was much messier than that, frankly.
Scarlett, let's come to you. Front page of the Daily Mail today. You'll have noticed it. Very important paper for the Prime Minister. Don't they know there's a war on, attacking people who want the Prime Minister to resign, saying there's a lot of geopolitical turmoil, there's a cost of living crisis. Shouldn't we just move on? What's your take?
Look, we all, the whole of the cabinet, the whole of the shadow cabinet agree about what to do about Ukraine. So it's not about Boris is out there on his own and he needs to be supported. The whole of Parliament support what's going on in Ukraine. So I think this is a complete and utter red herring. And I have to say that the Conservative government got rid of Margaret Thatcher at the beginning of the first Gulf War. I mean, a woman of amazing substance, and they got rid of her because they thought she was an election loser. So, you know, let's not talk about getting rid of people during wars. This isn't about whether it's cost of living or Partygate. I mean, what people are angry about is, you know, like that woman whose mother's funeral was not what she would have wished. But actually, it's about one rule for them and the other for us. So Boris Johnson broke his own rules, and then he went into Parliament and said that he hadn't. So he then lied. So actually, this is really serious. This isn't just about somebody accidentally going into their own birthday party, though many parents will know how many children's birthday parties were cancelled because of his rules. This is about actually somebody who is not fit to be Prime Minister.
Harry Phibbs, Scarlett makes a good case. Harry?
I would say that as far as the Ukraine is concerned, I think that it's clear that, I mean, look at it from the point of view of the Ukrainians. I mean, they would be very discouraged if we had this disruption of Boris Johnson resigning as Prime Minister and the uncertainty of it. It's not just a matter of changing Prime Ministers during the war, and people talk about, oh, well, what about swapping Neville Chamberlain for Winston Churchill? The point is that Boris Johnson has been playing a very important role in supporting Ukraine. He's been doing it ahead of other countries, and that's something that the Ukrainians have made perfectly clear they regard as very important indeed. So I think there is a legitimate argument that it would be bad timing as far as the situation in Ukraine is concerned. But I also agree with what you were saying earlier, that to some extent now, in terms of domestic concerns, people are concerned about the cost of living, and certainly lots of Conservatives will have plenty of criticisms of the government saying that tax is too high and that spending is too high, and from a Conservative point of view, that proper Conservative policies of reducing the role of the state haven't been applied. But I think that looking backwards over Partygate is probably something that people won't regard as a key priority for where we are now.
Scarlett Maguire, let's give the last word to you. You've been knocking around in the Labour Party for quite a while, so let me put this to you. Boris Johnson will hang on, the Tories will hang on, because in the end, Keir Starmer isn't ready. He's at best Kinnock rather than Blair.
No, I'm going to have to sort of try and unpack that. So I think it's very likely Boris Johnson will hang on. I don't think this is a good thing for the country. I think it's interesting that all the Westminster people talk about how he's going to survive. Actually, if you go to if you look at the opinion polls, they want him to go. Absolutely no question about it. They are appalled. Keir Starmer, on the other hand, is absolutely ready to go. But whether we have Boris Johnson against him or the next person, I don't think makes any difference. But I do think that Boris Johnson is now fatally wounded. We know that he lied. We know he lied to Parliament. When Parliament gets back, there is going to be a God almighty row about the fact that he told them no rules were broken. And actually, it's going to be very difficult. And the British people would quite like to have somebody with some moral fibre as their Prime Minister.
Well done, both of you. Good old ding-dong there. Harry Phibbs of Conservative Home and former Labour media advisor Scarlett Maguire. Good to see you both on GB News. Come back again soon. And so we turn to Carol Malone. She's not just a broadcasting and journalistic legend, a doyen of Fleet Street over many years. She's also writing a column for The Express these days. Carol, guide me through the morass here. What are we meant to think? What's going to happen?
Look, the lady you just had on, and so many interviews I've seen like that, where people, who lost people, who couldn't go to funerals, who couldn't bury them, who couldn't go and see them in care homes, those people will never forgive Boris. They will never forgive Rishi. They will never forgive the Tories for that. And I get that. I completely understand that.
How can you not? Such a powerful interview by Dougie Beattie there.
Completely. And Dougie says, Boris's apology has to be better for those people. No apology Boris makes is going to make up to those people. But I think we really, am I cross with Boris? Yes, of course I am. Do I want a change of government right now in an election? No, I don't, because there are so many other things at play. It's not one thing, Liam. It's just the war. It's the war. It's the cost of living crisis. Harry just said there, the strategies in place for the war. No, it might well be, but the bottom line is the Ukrainians think Boris is a superhero. They credit him, and this is true, he was the first to get weapons there. He was the first to call for sanctions. He's the one calling for heavier sanctions. He's been out there. Zelensky said the other day, this guy will go down in history for what he's done for our country. He's a hero here. And yet people here don't see that. And I think the people calling for Boris to go now, are the people who've been calling for Boris to go since the day he got elected. A lot of Labour people, a lot of people in the Tory party who don't like him. But it's interesting, there was a poll today with the other poll. There was a poll that said in January 38% of Tories wanted Boris to go. Today that figure is only 25%. So that's
interesting. Of Conservative voters.
Yeah, and that's 75% want him to stay. And the thing is, it would be completely destabilising and disruptive. What are we going to do? Are we going to start focusing now on a new leader? Are we going to start focusing on an election? And Keir Starmer.
Imagine a general election now.
Can you imagine?
Crikey.
And if Starmer, this is the bloke who can't say what a woman is. And do we want him in power? Do we want Angela Rayner as Chancellor? It makes me shiver with fear when I think about that. Yes, Boris has led us down with this. Although when you look at the quotes party, it wasn't exactly a party. He walked into a meeting where they had birthday cake for him. Okay, he should have walked straight back out again. Maybe, and he shouldn't have lied about it. However, I think now is the wrong time for a change of leadership. We need to be steered through this cost of living crisis and the war. It's very important Boris stays in place for this war because he's chivying people all the time.
Carol Malone, Express columnist, you stay with me for the rest of the show. Great to get your take. You're watching On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. The second part of our 2-hour special. After the break, we will keep this discussion going with GBNews reporters who are in the Prime Minister's and the Chancellor's own constituencies. And your emails are flooding in thick and fast on this divisive issue. Do voters care more about the cost of living crisis than about Partygate? Will outrage and scandal about those police fines fizzle out? Stay with us. You're On the Money.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Many places will be warmer and drier compared to yesterday. Also a little brighter with some sunny spells, but also a scattering of heavy showers, particularly for southern parts of the UK. Low pressure still close by. It's moving away, and these weather fronts are, departing the northeast of Scotland, but still a lot of cloud and further outbreaks of rain for the Northern Isles, for parts of Caithness into Aberdeenshire, the Murray Coast, where it will feel on the cool side. But elsewhere, brighter and warmer compared to Tuesday. But as temperatures rise, we'll see a few heavy downpours, particularly for parts of Northern Ireland, into central and southern England, South Wales as well. These showers will be slow moving in places, could be quite torrential at times. 20 Celsius the high in the southeast. I think a warmer day to come with mid-teens further north, but staying on the cold side in the northeast of Scotland, where there'll be a lot of cloud and some outbreaks of rain and drizzle continuing overnight. Some mistiness around coasts and increasingly misty, murky conditions around the Irish sea coast into the south coast. Low cloud creeping inland overnight. So some gloomy conditions about first thing tomorrow. Some sunny spells around eastern and central parts, but a lot of cloud cover. A mild start nevertheless, and actually as temperatures increase through the morning, the cloud will lift and break up somewhat. And for many places, by the afternoon, it's looking fine. a lot of dry and bright weather and a little warmer once again, 21 or 22 Celsius in the southeast. We're looking at 14 for Glasgow, 13 for Belfast, and for the vast majority it's dry, but for Northern Ireland, for Western Scotland, here the cloud thickens. We'll see some outbreaks of mainly light rain and drizzle approach from the west, but that's really the extent of the rainfall on Thursday, apart from the odd shower possible over East Anglia and Lincolnshire. Friday looks like the peak of the warmth, and it's going to be fine for most. Further showers to come in the weekend.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity. That's the question. That's two questions, actually. That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. You're on the money with me, Liam Halligan. It's 2:30, which means it's time now for the GB News headlines once more with Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon. It is 2:30. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date. Now, the terrorist who murdered Sir David Amess will spend the rest of his life in jail after being given a whole life order. The judge, Mr Justice Sweeney, said Ali Harbi Ali showed no remorse or shame after he killed the Conservative MP last October. Met Police Assistant Commissioner Matt Dukes read out a statement on behalf of Sir David's family.
It breaks our heart to know that our husband and father would have greeted the murderer with a smile of friendship and would have been anxious to help. How sickening to think what happened next. It is beyond evil.
UK inflation has hit a 30-year high, putting households under more pressure. Official figures show it jumped to 7% in March. That's up from 6.2% the month before. Increasing prices of petrol and food are fueling the rise. Another increase is expected in April, reflecting the recent hike in energy bills. The Prime Minister's position has been described as untenable. Nigel Mills is thought to be the first Tory backbencher to call for Boris Johnson's resignation. That's after the Prime Minister, his wife and Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, were all fined by police for breaching coronavirus rules when they attended the Prime Minister's birthday party in June of 2020. They have all apologised and confirmed the fines have been paid. The UK is sanctioning 178 Russian separatists for propping up breakaway regions in eastern Ukraine. The move's been coordinated with the European Union. It's as Moscow's bombardment of Ukraine continues. In his latest address, Volodymyr Zelensky said Russia's using phosphorus bombs against his country. We'll keep you up to date here on GB News. We're on your TV, online and DAB+ radio. Let's head back now to Liam for the special On the Money.
So as we've been reporting, UK inflation last month rose to 7%. That's a new 30-year high. Adds to pressure on households already struggling with the soaring cost of living. And it's a major challenge facing our government, which is also, of course, dealing with Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the political fallout of the Partygate fines issued yesterday to Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak. Let's go back to our reporters who've been getting reaction on how people are feeling about the cost of living crisis, about Partygate, which worries them more, what drives more anger. Anna Riley is in Rishi Sunak's own constituency of Richmond in Yorkshire, and Alice Porter joins us from the Prime Minister's West London constituency of Uxbridge and South Ruislip. Anna, let's go to you first. What's the mood in Richmond?
Good afternoon, Liam. Well, there's certainly been a mixed response on Partygate from people here. Certainly some people very angry and frustrated, some people who have had to go to funerals and not have their family there, but others saying we need to focus on the rising cost of living, we need to focus on Ukraine at the moment. And on the rising cost of living, actually here in Richmond, the Chancellor's constituency, fuel poverty has hit record levels, and that's according to a report by the campaign group End Fuel Poverty Coalition. They've estimated of the 14,000 homes here, 30% of them in this constituency are in fuel poverty. So people here are really certainly feeling the pinch. I've been out on the streets here to speak to people about that rise that's been announced of inflation today and the rising cost of living, and this is what they had to say.
About the future, I mean, you know, my parents' generation and my grandparents got to retire at a reasonable age and they got to have a decent retirement. It's starting to look like that'll never happen to us. We'll just be working until we die. So it's not good, is it? It's you feel like you've nothing to look forward to.
Disgusted, really, in the situation we're all living in. It shouldn't happen.
We do.
I think the time's now where the Chancellor needs to look at actually putting further stimulus into the economy, more so doing for people that are less well off.
You can't expect the government to do everything for these people. You know, you get money for this and they get money for that and they get money for everything else. And I'm not moaning because I don't get nothing, but I just don't think it's fair that they get what they get. You see these people on the news overnight sort of thing, they've hard up and they've got this, that, the other, but they've still got the hair dye, they've still got the nails done, they've still got smoking cigarettes, they've still got big tellies on the wall, so hardship is not known in this country. You know?
Don't worry about it now. I'm 90, I don't care. If they go up, they go up. If I die poor, I die poor.
Very interesting range of voices there, Anna. Let's go to you, Alice, in the Prime Minister's West London constituency of Uxbridge and South Ruislip. As you said earlier, a relatively affluent part of the country there on the fringes of north-west London. What's the mood where you are?
Hi there, good afternoon. Liam, yes, a very affluent area of London, but I have to say people I've been speaking to here are very concerned about the cost of living. I've been up and down the high street speaking with local business owners, and they're concerned that they're not getting the footfall that they would normally have. They'd normally expect people. This is a very popular place to go shopping. They're saying people aren't going shopping because they simply do not have the money. They're having to prioritise their budgets when it comes to increasing fuel prices, prioritise groceries, and sadly going out for a day shopping is really, many of them are saying is a thing of the past. So a lot of businesses concerned about how Uxbridge High Street is being affected, but there's also lots of very much ordinary people who are caught up in all this, worried about the rising costs of their bills. I was speaking to some of them this morning. This is what they had to say.
It's going to be tough, really tough, especially for the elderly, and people on very low income. I don't know how we're going to manage, really. Well, I think really we need some extra help. I don't know how the government's going to do it, but we really do.
It's got so expensive now. Well, I do worry every day to actually where should I travel to or where should I go to.
We have to think 10 times before spending the money. So obviously we're not as free as before, and with the bills and everything, we're a bit more restrained.
Again, a very interesting range of voices there. Alice Porter in Uxbridge and Anna Riley. Thanks so much for joining me here on The Money. Let's turn back to you, Carol Malone, Fleet Street legend, Express columnist.
I like when you say that.
My usual fee. I think our reporters have done really well there. They've got a really broad range of views. The guy from Yorkshire, there's no poverty in this country, etc. Then you hear from someone in Uxbridge, a very affluent place, saying that they're really struggling.
You know, inflation hasn't been at this rate since 1992. And this is going to get higher. So, you know, people are feeling in their pocket. And this inflation rate that we've heard today, the 7%, doesn't include the 54% rise in fuel costs.
That came in, indeed, in April.
All it includes is the fuel. So it is going to get appreciably higher than this. And so yes, of course, people are terrified by this. You know, I got my estimate of my bill, for my electricity bill the other day. It is literally nearly double. It's more than 54%. And so it's affecting everybody. It affects the very poorest. It affects people in the middle like me. No one is going to escape this.
And I'll tell you something else. This 7% inflation number, the headline number, I've said here often on The Money. Yeah. I don't think that's a real number for most people in the country. I'm not saying that the ONS is rigging the numbers. All I'm saying is that if you spend disproportionately heavy on food and fuel and transport, the things that have gone up the most, as lower income people do, then inflation, your lived experience, that phrase we must now use these days, of inflation is much, much higher.
During the pandemic, you know, there were lots of discounts on things. People were, you know, shops were discounting goods because they wanted to shut them. Now that's all gone. They can't afford to do that now. One of your reports there said, you know, there was smaller footfall on all the high streets, and that is true because people are saying, okay, it's 7% now. How much is it going to be in 2 or 3 months' time?
That's right.
What's it going to be like in a year's time? Because we've been told this is going to go up.
And their wages are falling because they're going up by less, if they're going up at all, than the rate of inflation.
The fear of this is, you know, I remember, you know, I'm old enough to have seen a couple of crashes in the markets in my lifetime, big crashes, and this is the most frightening of them all.
Very interesting. Carol Malone, stay with us. Express columnist. You're watching On The Money with me, Liam Halligan. After the break, how the war in Ukraine is having a major impact on consumers in the UK. Stay with us. You're On The Money.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. You're On The Money. Coming to the end of our 2-hour special now about inflation, talking about how consumers are feeling the impact of those rising prices. Inflation hit 7% on the Consumer Price Index measure, a new 30-year high. The RPI, the Retail Price Index, which the Bank of England used to target, that's at 9%. Producer price inflation, the cost of the inputs that firms use to make stuff they then sell to us, 19%, 19.2 precisely during the year to March. Now, the price of oil and gas did spike after Russia's invasion at the end of February, pushing up energy costs, transport costs and raw material costs for business. There's been a 9.9% rise in the cost of fuel as a whole in those official inflation numbers during the year to March, and that is in part due to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the impact on global energy and commodity markets, and that's helped to push CPI inflation to that 7% level that we learnt about this morning. Well, joining me from Lviv in Ukraine, I'm delighted to welcome the international desk editor of ZN.UA News website. That's Alexander Krebet. Alexander, great to have you on the show. You don't know this, but I'm a former foreign correspondent in both Russia and Ukraine. I've long understood how important those wheat markets, those commodity markets, those agricultural markets are in your fantastic country for Western food prices. Tell us about what this war is doing to the Ukrainian economy, to agricultural production. We've obviously been focused on the military aspects, the humanitarian aspects, but just let's talk for a little moment about the economic impact on Ukraine of this ghastly conflict.
Thank you for your good question, and thank you for having me. Yes, the war is impacting heavily Ukrainians, and experts, the analysts, they say Ukraine will lose almost the half of its GDP this year, and more than 70% of the people will live below the poverty line so far. And this is a huge, but with the agricultural things that our farmers, they are seeding the land and seeding the things they need to do in any places they can do it so far. But we have really good hopes for that, for the harvesting season.
Of course, the humanitarian aspect, the economic collapse in Ukraine will have a humanitarian knock-on effect in terms of poverty and deprivation, people losing their homes. A lot of people in the West, a lot of people in the UK, believe you me, are concerned about those humanitarian impacts. They're also concerned about the fact that they're now understanding just what a breadbasket Ukraine is. The agricultural output of your country is incredible. It's a very fertile country. But it strikes me now, Alexander, that a lot of people who should be sowing and harvesting crops for export, that sowing and harvesting is not going on, whether it's sunflower oil, whether it's potatoes, whether it's a whole host of other crops that Ukraine has exported in such huge volumes to the world over many years.
Yes, Ukraine is trying to export as much as we can right now, but due to the situation, it's sometimes much harder to bring the goods like sunflower oil, for example, from the east, where it's most produced, to the western borders of our country, and load all of those long vehicles and bring it to the Europe and the other countries in the Middle East and Africa, especially, where the people are having their food prices raised already because of the war.
Alexander Krebet, it's been fantastic to hear from you. We look forward to welcoming you back on GB News another time. Stay safe, and thanks for your contribution. Really interesting stuff there. You'll know, Carol, many people now understand how important geography is here. That southern coast of Ukraine, the Black Sea, towns like Odessa, port cities, they've been a grain funnel for generations, almost back to biblical times. You can't get ships in there. You can't get cargo vessels because of the war. This is having a massive knock-on impact.
I don't know how long this war is going to go on, but even when it's over, they can't just start producing anything again. We see the pictures every day, razed cities, traumatized people, no money. A lot of Ukraine isn't in Ukraine anymore. It's been funneled out. So you've got to reassemble an entire country to try and get them to function again. And we will suffer because of that. I mean, I say that, to hell with our suffering currently when you compare it with what's going on there. But you know what I'm saying. I mean, it will affect...
I do, and you've absolutely hit the nail on the head. This, for me, is the crux of this whole situation that the UK now finds itself in, that much of the Western world finds itself in. Yes, our political and media class is absolutely behind this effort in Ukraine to fend off Russia, to sanction Russia, to be as tough as possible. And I think there's a sort of wellspring of public opinion backing that.
Completely.
The popularity Boris Johnson is enjoying from that may well save his political skin. On the other hand, as inflation keeps rising, as food and fuel prices keep rising, how deep is that well of support for these tough sanctions on Russia, this ongoing conflict in Ukraine, as Ukraine battles rather than suing for peace with a country that's obviously much stronger militarily?
We've already seen it in Europe, places like, Italy and Germany, which are very dependent on Russian oil and gas. They're paying billions as we speak to get those supplies. So they're suffering already. And breaking sanctions probably as well. But you're right. And I think people have it's a terrible thing to say, but I think people have a short attention span in this world. This is happening now. I wonder how many pages of the newspapers, every paper every day has 8 or 10 pages on Ukraine. I wonder how many people are reading all 8 or 10 pages. We did at the start, but then what you do is you move on with your life and you forget, and we must not forget, because it affects each and every one of us. Putin affects us all. So yes, but I think people do get, and it's a terrible thing to say, but I think people do get weary of stuff like this. They think, I can't read any more of that. It's hell, I can't read it. But we must read it.
And maybe they'll start questioning a policy that's continuing, some would argue, to drive up food and fuel prices, which really harms a lot of vulnerable households in this country.
But when they get to that stage, they must remember what the people of Ukraine are suffering. We're very clear. We're a few hours away from Ukraine. This was a vibrant democracy just a few weeks ago. We have to remember when we're talking about a few extra pence on whatever. And yes, it's tough. I get it's tough, but it's not as tough as it is for them.
Carol Malone, we'll come back to you. Thank you so much. Now, more European countries do feel under threat from Russian aggression, as Moscow has reportedly moved missile systems and military equipment to the border with Finland. It's believed that the threats have come after support for NATO membership has grown in the Nordic state, and the Finnish Prime Minister Sanna Marin has said a decision could be made in the coming weeks about Finnish NATO membership. What should Britain's attitude be to that possibility? And will we have to start putting more money into defence spending because of Russia's threats? Let's talk now to former senior military intelligence officer and NATO planner, Philip Ingram. Philip, good to have you on the show. Firstly,
good afternoon.
Defence spending. It's been falling for many years as a share of GDP. We just about reached that 2% of GDP target, that international NATO commitment here in the UK. I suggest that to you that defence spending is going to be higher in the years to come rather than lower.
Well, in recent years, we've been slightly above 2% GDP, and the government has announced more money, so it's gone above that. But yes, I agree, there needs to be more. And I think the war in Ukraine and the continuing Russian threat, and of course, the wider threats, we've still got China and other countries around the world that could influence what's going on. So we are going to need to increase our spending, but we also need to get our military to spend the money more wisely. The army haven't done particularly well with their latest armoured vehicles.
Finland's often had a complex relationship, certainly with the Soviet Union, with Russia, siege of Leningrad, now St. Petersburg, and all the rest of it. For those of us who know our history, could Finland join NATO? What would that do in terms of the broader relationship between Russia and the West?
Well, it's interesting. Both Sweden and Finland are not NATO members, but they are EU members, and they're considering it very closely indeed. And the movement of the Russian missiles, it was a routine move, replacing the old S-300 air defense missiles with new S-400. But it's interesting that they used more press pictures to try and influence Finnish defence thinking. I think it's up to the Finns and the Swedes whether they wanted to join NATO. It gives them access to Article.
We've lost Philip Ingram there, our former senior military intelligence officer and NATO planner. I do apologise, viewers, and indeed to Philip. Be good to get him back on the show again soon, talking there about possible Finnish membership of NATO. But let's just finally move on. Countless Brits travelling during this Easter break have been met with chaos and are being warned of worse ahead. Hundreds of flights have been cancelled from UK airports. Roads are set for gridlock, with millions expected to use their cars as this forthcoming Easter weekend approaches. P&O ferry routes are still in crisis, of course. There's lots of engineering work on the trains, certainly on my line. It all adds up to what could amount to travel misery over the bank holiday weekend. Well, joining me now to talk about that is the CEO of Blue Bay Travel. Another long-standing friend of the show is Alistair Rowland. Great to have you with us, Alistair. Try and tell me something that's going to make me happy about travelling over the next few days, please.
Well, I think, Liam, we've got to be careful what we wish for here. I was in Manchester Airport last night. Everybody got through Manchester from one side to the other in less than an hour, and it was more fine than it has been. There is some delays in border force, but actually a lot of this, Liam, is practical stuff. So people have forgotten how to go on holiday almost. What they were saying yesterday is that going through security, the amount of bags getting stopped, so cabin bags, that's up 65%. And why? Well, it's because people are taking liquids above 100 ml. So very basic stuff. So what I would say to your viewers is it's not as bad as you now read. Be sensible. Go to the airport early, but not super early because the airport can't handle you. So 3 hours, not 5 hours. Make sure your passport's up to date. Make sure that you've packed your cabin bag okay. You've got the tests if you need tests to go into resort, although that's less a thing now. And you should get through fine. All of our clients going through this morning in the London and Manchester airports have got through fine within 90 minutes.
Alistair, we're going to have to leave it there. It's always great to have you on the show. You will be coming back again soon, so stand by your mobile. I'll be calling you again. Carol, quick last word of you. I do want to get to a couple of emails as well. What do you think about that increased defence spending that we've heard about from Philip Ingram?
We have to do it, Lord Dannett.
Even if it means less for the NHS?
No, we have to do both.
Choices.
We have to do both. Well, the NHS needs reforming. That's a whole different argument. But no, we have to spend more on defence. It's going to be taken down to 72,000. Putin had 150,000 troops amassed on the border of Ukraine before he attacked. It shows you how little we are. Lord Dannett says we have to have it. Tom Tugendhat said this is not the time to be cutting down. We have to increase, not cut. And we only spent, it's 2.2. It's 2.2 on defence for our GDP. Dannett said it has to be 3. Now, he knows. He's led the army. He knows what's required. He knows what the army has to do. We have to listen to people like him.
And Carol, how is this going to work out? Do you think Boris is going to get away with it? Is he going to be the next Prime Minister? Is he going to win the next election? How's it going to... Mystic Carol, come on.
I think he will win the next election. I think the Tories will win the next election, even if it's Boris. I think they will win. But yeah, he has to be allowed to get on with his job now. I know some people will never forgive him, and I'm sorry for those people. I'm lucky I didn't lose anyone I loved through COVID. They did, and they will never forgive him. But he has to be allowed to get on with his job now.
It's as you say, isn't it? There will be pockets of real anger with people who will never forgive lockdown, never forgive the Tories. Yeah. But on balance,
it's not even about Labour and Tory anymore. Labour always want Boris out. They've wanted him out since day one. It's about people who are grieving and who didn't get to say goodbye, and everyone else.
Great to have you on the show, Carol Malone, Fleet Street legend. I did it again, and Express columnist. Always welcome here on GBNews. Couple of quick emails. Is it possible that Boris and his co-workers being in the same room in mid-June 2021 was not an offence at all? Is interpreting the convening of colleagues in an office to communicate while having to bite to eat and a drink as breaking lockdown rules merely police vindictiveness. That was Patty, and Vivian says, I think we're debating the wrong question about Boris Johnson. Our Prime Minister has been proven to lie again and again and flaunt rules. The question should be, do you want a Prime Minister who blatantly lies and disregards rules as the head of our country? Well, thanks for being with me during this GB News On the Money 2-hour inflation special. I'll be back again tomorrow at 1 p.m. because this is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and that was On the Money.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christys.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.